novel air-mobile war fought by the United States Army in Vietnam has proved the effectiveness of new battle concepts featuring the combat helicopter. These concepts are constantly being added to and improved. One of the highly successful developments to come out of the stress of battle is the addition of the helicopter door gunner, the shotgun rider. Originally a pilot, co-pilot, and a crew chief who also served as door gunner made up the crew. Combat proved the urgent need of manning machine guns on both sides of the helicopter. So a fourth man, a door gunner specialist, was added. Thus, the helicopter shotgun rider is a unique product of the American experience of war in Vietnam. He has proved himself to be a vitally important member of the crew.
Hey, come here, good.
Yep, left, middle, and right.
Hey, how many of them do we have to get him up here? Hey, target's being spread. Hey, guns up! Let's go! Guns up! Guns up!
The fear of imminent death is different from other types of fear. Knowing that one of those bullets could find its mark, it grips you, you can't shake it.
Most who join the military and go to war are young, 18, 19 years old, and many have never been away from home.
That's what intrigues a lot of us to stay in it, because it is kind of a secret society. No one really knows who we are and what we do, so.
Not everybody can make it through the training. I mean, it's tough, mentally and physically. Not everybody has that commitment.
You'll never find out until you do it.
I've done a lot of things I thought were impossible, and nothing's impossible anymore. You have to be a good individual first before you can be a good team player. I know for a fact how bad Hell Week is. I went through it a couple times. It's probably the most brutal military training anybody can go through. So everybody to my left and everybody to my right, they've been through this. So I know mentally, these individuals are extremely hard. And when stuff gets bad in any situation, I know these guys have my back.
Left guard 6, I'm down on corral. I've got contact with some snipers, over. Everybody get off the middle of this LZ. Everybody move out, get out there. Four 6, get that mortar set up on the hill. I want fire in 1 minute. Get them moving, make up. Second platoon, 3 o'clock, they're on the other hill. Camino, I want artillery on that hill, and I want it now. Hurry up. Get over there, come on. Come on.
From Vietnam to Iraq to Afghanistan, Americans have sadly discovered that the U.S. government lied about the missions in these wars. The U.S. was winning until it wasn't. But just remember, big lies have big consequences for those who fought in those wars. Secrecy and deception convey power. Deception can be coercive. When it succeeds, it can give power to the deceiver. One of those victims of those big lies that had big consequences is combat Vietnam veteran George Robinson, who is here to tell his story today. George is a 100% disabled Vietnam veteran and is today speaking for the millions of his fellow veterans and especially for the 58,000 men and women who died in another senseless war, the Vietnam War. He has proposed new legislation to protect the youth of America from future wars.
I served in Vietnam from January 12 to approximately, because I was unconscious after a major wounding, June 13, 1966. And I was based near Saigon, but I was in a platoon that flew around the country. It was actually the southern part of South Vietnam, so I didn't have a base camp. My return back to the U.S. Was at a hospital. I spent a year in that hospital, 8 months of which I spent in bed. So I didn't really get a chance to integrate in society. I had visitors come visit me, but I didn't actually have any kind of experience that one would have if one would just left the military in a normal way. When I came back from Vietnam, I had a change of heart, as one would expect with such an experience after going as a very young person and then experiencing what I did. I had a change of heart and felt that people of my age shouldn't be in combat. We were just too naive, too young, and unable to cope with the kind of decision-making, life and death decision-making that's required of one under the most chaotic conditions in combat. My injuries remind me every day, because I still have wounds that don't heal, so every day I'm reminded by the limitations of my body, actually, of my experience, and it makes me more and more committed to try to change the laws that require young people, too young, prematurely, to go to combat. My legislation proposes a postponement of deployment to combat for anyone younger than age 21. One other thing I want to emphasize about my experience in combat is that the wounds are not limited to physical. There are emotional scars. Some people suffer greatly from them, including guilt complexes. They call it survivor guilt complexes. I had the opportunity to take advantage of the Veterans Administration PTSD group talks, and now we who were 17 and 18 in Vietnam are now septuagenarians. We're in our 70s, and I hear what other people experienced in Vietnam and how when they look back on their time, they talk about regrets that they have. And, you know, I always hear this thing, if I knew then what I know now, they wouldn't have gone. They went because they were patriotic. They thought we were afraid of the spread of communism and we had the best of intentions. But it turned out that the political aspects of things had precedence over the military. I don't know whether many of our people are aware of it, but suicides among returning veterans, especially those of the age that I'm interested in, from 17 to 21, wind up taking their own lives or having other consequences, including homelessness, domestic violence is another thing that they suffer from. And many are incarcerated because they're unable to cope with the transition from war to civilian life.
This is the Insider Exclusive. It is my great pleasure to introduce my good friend, George Robinson, to the show. Welcome to the show, George.
Thank you.
Tell our audience a little bit about who you are, where you grew up.
I grew up in Long Island, New York, And I was surrounded by World War II veterans who, when I was a young boy, I idolized. There was so much positive attention paid to World War II veterans. We had Memorial Day parades, etc. So I grew up with an idea that service to country was an honorable thing and very important. And when I became a teenager, we had some family issues. Also, I thought I was a man before I was a man, as many people do. And so I quit high school after the 11th grade and decided to join the Army. I was initially assigned for my first tour to Nuremberg, Germany, with the 4th Armored Division in Armor Intelligence, which is recon. And when I was reading the Stars and Stripes one weekend in Germany, I read about the influx of soldiers in Vietnam, and I was really tired of lining up armored vehicles and feeling that all we could do is play war. And as a young man, I wanted to do war. I wanted to be responsible for single-handedly ending the spread of communism around Southeast Asia. That was my fantasy. And being 17 at the time, and eventually 18 when I arrived, I had nothing to dissuade me from that vision immediately. But if anyone has seen the movie Platoon, there's a scene in it where the soldiers who have been in combat are leaving to get on an airplane, and the recruits are coming. And there's a very great difference between the ones who've been in war and the ones who haven't. So when I and many others who went to Vietnam together arrived, we were very naive. We didn't realize what we were getting into, and as time went on, that was proven to be true. We had no clue. We thought war was just kind of a game. We didn't understand that we could die. I mean, as silly as it seems. Nowadays, with people playing violent video games, I wonder if it wouldn't be the same with our young people today.
Let's talk about your first assignment in Vietnam. Where were you assigned?
Originally to Lai Khe, which is a village about 20 kilometers from Saigon, with the 1st Infantry Division, 3rd Brigade is located there. But I was assigned an infantry recon platoon, and so we flew around in helicopters and other kinds of aircraft much of the time. I spent very little time at Lai Khe. And when I was there, we were attacked by mortars, and it was action all the time. And I was a replacement for people who had been killed. Even the company commander had been killed there by a sniper just prior.
This was January
1966. I arrived at Camp Alpha and then driven to Lai Khe. And we were driven in a deuce and a half. People might recognize it as a 2.5-ton truck. And it had fencing all around it. You know, and I said, why do they have fence around the back of the truck where we're sitting? Well, because the Viet Cong throw grenades into the back of the truck. And this is the entree to the war in Vietnam. Right from the airport, I realized that we were in probably deeper than I should have been.
When you got off the plane, what was your first impression?
Well, of course, sensory, the heat and humidity hit you right away. And I don't know, I liked the atmosphere. It was very orderly. There was a little terminal there, and I saw Vietnamese people. Everything was fine at the time. It's hard to imagine that eventually the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese took over our air base there. Seems like there's a repetition of history now with Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan being left to the Taliban.
Now let's talk about your 6-month tour in Vietnam. You were initially injured. I think you have with you a helmet, correct?
2 months, and it's a relatively long story, but I was in the prone position facing a wood line of vegetation, and we were attacked, and the Viet Cong, this was not the North Vietnamese Army, we were in the south. So the North Vietnamese Army didn't concentrate where we were. And a neighboring guy who subsequently got shot in the arm, said to me to put my helmet on. I had my helmet off. I put my helmet on, and shortly after that, was shot in the head, and the helmet flew off. And I spent about 10 days in the 93rd Evac Hospital in Saigon. And then they had a rule then, I think, Steve, you might remember, being a Vietnam veteran, that if you had a wound that wouldn't heal within 90 days, you were serviceable and you'd go back to duty. And there were some people who were looking for that $1 million wound. They would have thought, George, you had a wonderful excuse to go back after just 2 months instead of the full 12-month tour. But being 18, I wanted to fight communism because I believed that I could stop the spread of communism. This is the fantasy that we young people have, and I applaud them for it because they do some wonderful things in their naivete. But this was a wake-up call when I got shot in the head, and John, the man who told me to put this on, got shot in the arm. And then subsequently, there were many occasions, one that I'll never forget, that still with me. We received a mortar attack at a bivouac where we were, and two men, young men, very young men, a white man and a black man were hit, and the white guy died. He was laying outside the tent with a cover on him, and the black guy was dying. He was hit internally, and I was asked to go into the tent with the medics and hold the foot of his stretcher. And they wanted him to cough. They were yelling at him to cough to clear his lungs of the blood. I noticed his ear was blown off something. And the intense heat and humidity and the whole scene, the tension of someone literally dying got to me. And when he coughed and the blood got on me, I was going to pass out. I had to hand the end of the stretcher to another guy. I just was going to faint from the stress of the whole thing.
You were injured a second time. Tell us about that.
3 months later, it was a major engagement along the Cambodian border, northwest of Saigon. And there were 3 line companies were pinned down in the Michelin rubber plantation with lines of rubber trees near 72 kilometers from Loc Ninh, the Cambodian border, where the Ho Chi Minh Trail emptied out. And my platoon was sent to hand carry ammunition to the line companies because helicopters weren't able to drop ammunition because of the tree canopy overhead. So we were carrying ammunition out to the line companies. We started to get shot at when somebody I know got shot, and right away they're up in the trees somewhere, we didn't know. And when we got to the area, they started firing upon us, and we ran for one of these irrigation ditches that they have between each row of rubber trees. It was a big mistake, a fatal mistake. And we were surrounded, and they had the high ground, and they lobbed grenades down, and I got one shot off, and then the grenade came, and I was blown down on top of another guy. I was lying there face down. His scalp was pulled back, I don't know, he was moaning. And I lay there. We're about 2.5 feet below the level. Our mortars and artillery were coming in, feeling that they would hit the Viet Cong, but we were there too, and branches were falling down. I could hear the artillery rounds coming in. And then I heard some Vietnamese voices, really very fast, and they stood on the edge of the ditch, and they shot everybody again. I got shot in the head of the femur. I, was knocked over, so to speak, from my prone position. And I lay there. They grabbed the suspenders on my back because they wanted our equipment. I had a belt and suspenders holding up a rucksack. And I'm lying there, thinking I'm dead, I'm lying there, and they took the equipment. I felt like they would see me breathing. I was afraid. They didn't because they were panicked, and they left. I heard their voices trail off. Meanwhile, there's small arms fire going on and artillery or 4-deuce mortars coming in. And I started to call for help. I'm lying there, and I see around this curved ditch the bodies of my other guys in my platoon. I didn't know what happened to them, but I started to call for help, and I tried to do a push-up to get my head above the ditch. And as soon as I tried that, I blacked out because I didn't realize I had lost so much blood. Bottom line was the grenade blew out the back of my thigh and damaged my nerves, and the bullets broke my femur. And they came with stretchers after the fighting died down a little bit. It was still going on. And they found out that most of the men were dead. And there were 2 who were wounded but still alive, me and one other guy. And they put us on the ground, and they called in a helicopter that had a basket. And they put me in the basket and hoisted me up like they do with the astronauts when they fall into the ocean. And I was taken to the hospital, and then I don't remember much except my medical records show that I spent a couple of days in hospital in the Philippines, and then eventually Travis Air Force Base, and then eventually New York, where I spent a year in the hospital, almost a calendar year from my enlistment, my 3rd year of my enlistment, and I was 8 months of which I never got out of bed. My legs were in a spica cast, what they call a spica cast, with a bar and traction through here. And I had maggots in my cast, and they were shooting us up with drugs. I mean, I know I feel terrible about the opioid crisis, but when you have the kind of pain that you have when you're ripped apart in battle, I mean, I don't know how my great-great-grandfather did it, he was in the Civil War. All they had was opioids at the time. So anyway, I became addicted to opioids. They shot me up so many times, my arms were all black and blue. So to shoot me up again, they had to cut holes in my cast and stick me in the thigh, because I was getting Demerol, pure Demerol, and every 4 hours, So I spent a year attached to the hospital, 8 months in bed, and then I retired with disability.
And you've been, ever since that time, 100% disabled?
Well, no, it was 70, and then it was determined that I didn't think I did, but they determined that I was suffering from PTSD, and they added some percentage to make it up to 100.
After Vietnam, at that stage of your life, you became a teacher. You retired not too long ago, right?
From teaching? No, actually, in 1997 I retired. I took early retirement because I couldn't deal with the stress and the physical aspects of teaching. It was just too much. But I did it for 27 years.
Yeah, during the last 30 years, and especially during the last few years, you've had time to reflect on, your involvement with America's wars, and also how little the government thinks about using infants in the infantry. And that's where, by the way, it was many, many years after I was in the infantry that I discovered, hey, that's why they the old men send the young kids out and they die. So you have been active, and you're an advocate for changing the age limit specifically of young men
and women
who want to join the military today but would be prohibited from being in combat arms, basically.
Yes.
I saw a news clip, I think it was this morning, of one of the fathers of the deceased Marines that died in Bagram Air Base. Is it Bagram? No, Kabul. One of the 13 Marines that died, and he said when he turned 18, all he ever wanted to do was be a Marine. And I'm thinking, wow, this is the same kind of insane thinking that not only do parents, but young people think they want to be patriotic, they want to go fight, but at that young age, oftentimes they make decisions that affect them for the rest of their lives, like you. So you have been an advocate for change in the military, and that's why we're here today. And you have made a proposal to your local congressman, and I have a copy of that, which I'm going to bring to Maxine Waters. But let's talk in a nutshell what you are proposing that Congress should enact.
From my life experience, and as subsequently after Vietnam, I became a father of 4. I raised children through the years. My youngest is now 21, will graduate from Colgate University soon. I have experience as someone who was a teenager in war, and as a father of people who grew through the teenage years. And just as an observer of society, I noticed that teenagers are wonderful. They have a wonderful vibe. You know, life is wonderful. It's easy, and you know, they're a little bit zany. And you know, you walk into a store and you see a sign that said cigarettes or tobacco products are prohibited to anyone under 21. And then when you have a son and you want to register, or daughter, you want to register for the car, the insurance rates are extremely high. Why? Because the accident statistics show that many people of that age are disproportionately involved in even fatal accidents. And likewise with pulmonologists and oncologists, scientists in medicine, researchers say that no one under 21 should smoke a cigarette or be able to buy tobacco products. And the federal government will not allow anyone under 21 to have a handgun. So it seems to me that there's something in the air, that there's a recognition that at a certain age, people are not yet prepared for certain type of experiences. Now, combat, they call it the fog of war. I mean, combat is it's like chaos. You can't predict all the variables that are going on. And so whereas I didn't think, from my experience and what I've just said, I didn't think that young people should be in ground combat or combat, you know, face-to-face combat. I felt that nobody would really do anything to change that, because it had been done since 1775. From 1775 until the present, still existing, you can enlist in the military at 17 with parental permission, 18 without, and they enlist people up to 39 years old. And I said, you know, is it wrong for them to go into the military? No, it's not. The military is great. There are many great careers in the military, and anyone who wants to, from 17, can enlist in the military. My project is about a postponement of deployment to combat. That's all I'm saying. So someone can still enlist, male and female, and they can even train for combat MOS, military occupational specialty, which is a job description. But they would not be actually deployed to combat until they reach at least 21. Now, developmental cognitive neuroscientists, brain scientists, have concluded, with the help of the latest technology, functional MRI, able to take videos of the brain in operation compared to the original MRI, which took a still picture of the brain. So they've seen and learned a lot since, I think, around 2012 about brain development. And their conclusion is that the part of the brain where we have decision-making power, the one that is responsible for us, considered to be mature, is the part right behind the forehead. It's called the frontal cortex. That develops slowly vis-a-vis or compared to other parts of the brain, and it doesn't develop fully until, the neuroscientists say, at least the mid-20s, even as late as 30, I've read. So I felt that for the first time now, there's scientific reasons to say that a certain group of people should not be doing a certain job. And I know that that job requires the most brain horsepower you can have. Because when you're in combat, even though you have your orders, you're out there alone many times. You have to make many decisions under the greatest stress, the threat of your life and the lives of your compatriots. So I felt, wow, now I have scientific evidence, like those other laws I mentioned, pointing to the reason younger people than 21 shouldn't do certain things, I feel that the science supports the fact that they shouldn't go to combat. Now, how do I prove that? Because I know I need to have evidence. Well, I happened to come across a book, which, if I may show it.
Please.
Came across a book, and by the way, this is nothing to do with promoting the book. In fact, Dr. Blake Moore is a professor at Cambridge University, heads up a neuroscience lab. She's totally academic and has no interest in marketing her book. But I am saying the book was revolutionary. It's called Inventing Ourselves, The Secret Life of the Teenage Brain. And she describes what they've learned about brain development. And this is what was the catalyst that got me started on my quest to have Congress change the rules such that someone can enlist in the military, nothing would change. They can be trained for anything they'd like. But if, and we hope it won't happen, if there's a war declared or not declared, since Congress doesn't like to declare war, that they would not be participating in combat until at least age 21. And so I would recommend to all the viewers, especially parents, loving parents, who want the best for their children to read this book and think about the implications of their joining the military and whether or not they would be deployed to combat. There's no anti-military sentiment in this. It's all about protecting youth from premature involvement in something that they wouldn't be able to handle that well. Now, when you go to the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C., and I have the directory of names here. This is the directory of names from 1959 to 1975 of the Americans killed in Vietnam. And as I thumb through the pages, I want you to realize that Department of Defense data says that the average age of those killed in Vietnam, or who served in, those who served in Vietnam was 19, the average age. And I recently visited the New York Vietnam Veterans Monument at Water Street down by Manhattan's Battery Park. And if you look at the names of all those killed from New York City emblazoned on the wall, everyone is like 18, 20, 21, 19, teenagers. A lot of young people. So I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I don't feel that the nation even needs to send younger people. People will say to me, well, then how are they going to be ready for war? The average age in World War II is 26. And now, since the Volunteer Army was created, many of the troops tend to be older, from the late 20s on even. And there's no lack of readiness. They're still able. And as Steve has pointed out to me, with technology, there's less and less opportunity or necessity to use ground troops. So I am quite confident that the military would not be disadvantaged if they postpone the deployment of anyone below 21. And I'm trying to get the legislators to accept that, and I've contacted my representative, my congressman, who was kind enough to approve of my proposal, but not willing to actually sponsor it. But he has tried to help me get in touch with others who'd be involved. And fortunately, our senator, one of New York's senators, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, is on the Senate Armed Services Committee, and there's a readiness subcommittee and a personnel subcommittee. So I've applied to her and asked for her to support the bill. And as far as Senator Schumer goes, though he's not on a relevant committee, I would like him also to support this bill. And I'm asking everybody who hears this and is sympathetic to what I'm saying to please contact your representatives. I know people always say, oh, contact them, and they say, well, we'll only get a form letter back or something. It doesn't matter. But believe me, it does matter. They are very sensitive to well-expressed critiques of the situation. And I ask you to do that, to recommend that to your congressmen and senators.
We are definitely going to do this, and I want to thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.